After playing Action Girls Racing, I didn't have much faith in Conspiracy. These are the people who are actually releasing Data Design's awful games. They are helping them to ruin the Wii with terrible titles. However, I think this game might be showing that they're starting to release good games for the Wii, and not just releasing bad cash-ins of old titles that weren't even acceptable then. Real Heroes Firefighters is an interesting concept. Make a game that puts you in the shoes of a firefighter. The problem with doing that is their job is very repetitive, and kinda not cut out for a video game translation. That being said, the people who made this game I think did the best what they could with the limited amount of options they had to play with. However, as this game drags on, you'll notice that the real part of this title goes away very fast. The game goes from somewhat realistic to insanely crazy as the hours go by. They were doing a good job in the beginning having an overall story for each chapter. Sure, the stories were very simple, but at least they tried, and I can't fault them for that. How deep of a story can you have in a firefighting simulator? Why couldn't they just keep up with the plausible, realistic simulations? Instead, towards the end, it gets way past the point of feasible and moves towards something you would see on a cartoon. Now, the stories were a bit silly at times. Now I'll talk a little bit about the missions they had you go on, but I'm not going to spoil any of the later missions in the game. I want that to be a surprise if you ever decide to play this game. But with that said, I think one of the more crazy ones is when you had to go into a house and you go upstairs and you find a bunch of gas barrels in the room.
Holy crap. Lieutenant Scott, we discovered a large supply of what looks to be like gasoline, sir, stored inside the residence.
Apparently the guy who owned this house was hoarding gas. Now I can kind of understand that, but they were in an upstairs bedroom. How did he even get those barrels in there? Also, wouldn't the gas smell kill him? Why not just keep it in his garage? Wouldn't that make more sense? Or there's the mission where you have to save reels of film from a fire. Why? Because apparently these are the only copies of the film ever made. But they don't seem to care because they just keep them lying around. And to top it off, the projectionist won't even help you find a way into the theater to help the stranded people until you do it. What a jerk. Yes, logic is the one thing you can't expect in this game, but as long as you realize that, you will enjoy the action. The controls were a mixed bag. When you had to do the most basic actions like using your fire extinguisher or fire hose, it was as simple as pointing at the screen and pressing B. You could change the way the stream of water would come out to a more of a spread of a mist, but I never saw the point of doing that, and I stayed with the normal stream of water. The rest of the controls were a bit problematic though, since they use motion controls for the rest of the tools in your arsenal. The axe is the easiest motion control tool to handle. You just equip it and then you make a thrusting motion with your Wiimote. And no, you can't murder people with it. They give you a pry bar to open doors, and you have to do the motion of stabbing into the door and side-to-side motions like you were trying to break the lock. The problem is that it would only read these motions when it felt like it. Most of the time it would just clank off the door and you'd have to do it again. Then there's the Jaws of Life, where you have to turn your Wiimote in the direction they indicate to pry open the doors. And then there's the cutting saw, which I thought controlled the worst of all the motion controls. They give you lines to cut out so you can make a door where there was a wall previously. The problem is that it wouldn't read your positions correctly, and it would take longer than it really should have. Also, why does it care so much if I'm off the line? I can understand if we're supposed to make a neat door cutout, but look at these patterns. It's all jaggedy and disjointed. This part would be so much better if we could just cut the wall out any way we wanted. One thing for sure, it would have looked a lot better than the cutout pattern they had laid out. The level designs were pretty linear, and it was fairly easy to know where to go next after you complete the area. However, when it comes to completing the objective in the area, it can sometimes get confusing. They would sometimes tell you with an arrow where to go to complete an objective, and sometimes they wouldn't. Even when they gave you the arrow, it was sometimes confusing. I once spent 20 minutes looking for a guy in an enclosed warehouse to rescue him, and the game didn't give me any indication where he was. And that would normally show bad level design. But it occurs to me, maybe they did that on purpose. You're playing the role of a firefighter, and that's one of their jobs, to find people when it's really hard to do. Like for example, in a smoky room with low visibility. So maybe the creators were just trying to recreate that with the lack of help or direction. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt on this. In each mission there are hidden objects to find, which will give you a clue on what caused the fire in the mission you were just in. So there is some replayability if you want to search for them all. Real Heroes Firefighters is not a bad game, only a repetitive one. It does a good job of recreating what firefighters would normally have to deal with in the beginning of the game. Then it kind of meanders into the world of the ridiculous. I'm sure if a firefighter ever played this game, they would be laughing the whole time at some of the situations these real firefighters had to deal with later on. With that said, I can see younger kids really enjoying this game, so this game is definitely worth a rent.